Michael Kaskey-Blomain, 97.3, ESPN.com, covering the 76ers. I know he was at the home games and got to see them up close and personal, and also watching the Sixers the last couple of nights. Let's get his take on what is going on with this team so far. Michael, just 5 games into the season. It's not time to hit a panic button, and it's not crazy talk to ask questions. However, what are some disturbing things that you're seeing early on that may become a trend moving forward?
Well, Mike, I don't want to start this off by talking about Markelle Fultz. I mean, there's enough people talking about him, writing about him, but it's virtually impossible to discuss like the start of this Sixers season without doing so through the scope of the Fultz situation, because how they're using him is really impacting the entire game. So I think having him in the starting lineup and just not being as productive as, obviously JJ was last year and as productive as we would like him to be is just having an overall effect on the team. I think on the rotation, on the offensive end, on the defensive end. This is a team right now, they're 18th in team defense, 18th in team offense, which is, worst in the middle of the pack. It's just not looking like the team it was last year. There's some injury issues you could point to, obviously, but I think, the main thing that it comes down to is just not even necessarily Markelle's play, just the fact that him being in the starting lineup to start the game, but then not to finish the games and not being sure exactly how he's going to be used on a game-to-game basis, I think is really kind of throwing a wrench in this team's development right now.
Okay, I want to ask you, forget all what he's doing, what he's not doing. Let's say he was serviceable right now and had a definitive role. His body language is unacceptably poor. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I would to an extent. I saw a lot of people talking about his body language, and I do agree it does not ooze of a guy that's very happy with the situation and confident in himself. The only thing I will say that, from what I've seen back in, in college and summer league, he was never the most jubilant player out on the floor. He's always kind of looked at almost like he looks kind of cool or laid back. I don't think that, while I do agree it doesn't look good.
I don't see cool and laid back. I see miserable.
I think it's just more
insecure.
His general body language. I don't think it's necessarily I don't think he's putting it out there as a result of what's going on the floor. I'm sure it's not helping him, but I think that's kind of just his demeanor, which in and of itself might be a problem because it doesn't seem like he has, that
Michael,
high of a motor.
Do you the other night, he
doesn't look like he even has a motor.
He said the other night that he felt more comfortable. Like he said, I feel much better with the ball in my hands. He almost went Freddie Mitchell on everybody.
I'd love for him to have Freddie Mitchell's confidence.
Is that his way of trying to say, I don't like my role?
You know what, Mike? That's almost how it came off to me. That was obviously after the game where Ben didn't play. He played, Markelle played pretty well in that first half before he didn't play much in the second half. I don't think he was necessarily saying that, he might not like his role, but I think he's telling people, maybe he's not the most comfortable with his role right now, and that might have something to do with the struggles we see. Because, you see when he gets the ball and can kind of control things, he definitely looked more comfortable in that situation than he does when Ben has the ball and he's relegated to standing in the corner or setting down screens or something like that. So he's clearly more confident, at least right now, with the ball in his hands, and that's, something that could be an issue, obviously, moving forward.
MKB, how concerned are you that Fultz and Simmons can't play together? I mean, right now it's obvious, and Fultz is going through growing pains, to try and put it positively, but how long does Brown stick with this? I mean, like you mentioned, he's starting him off in games, and then he's playing bench minutes. We're barely seeing him in the second half in a lot of these games. If this continues to trend in this same direction, when is Brown going to say, you know what, Fultz is better with the ball in his hands, like we're talking about. Let's bring him off the bench, and let's try and get this team going and figure out what's best for the team? Or do you feel this is best for the team and it's just going to take time?
No, that's a great question. And honestly, I think that situation should happen now. I personally thought coming into the season that the starting lineup would stay the same. JJ would hold down that shooting guard spot, and then Markelle would come in to, provide a spark off the bench and split some minutes on the court with Ben when the situation presented itself. I was personally pretty surprised when they decided to do the whole Markelle starting experiment. And at this point, it just looks like you said, it's just not working out on the floor. And they, unless they're really willing to take a hit record-wise in this first month or two to start out the season, I would reverse course, bring JJ back into that starting lineup to bring back the continuity of last year, and then bring Markelle in off the bench. You still get him time to develop. You could get him, anywhere from 18 to 24 minutes a game. He'll have the ball in his hand some. He'll play off the ball some. I feel like that'll just take a little bit of pressure off him. There's so much attention on him now being in the starting lineup and how the teams are sagging off of him. I just think that'll kind of diffuse the pressure on him a bit, and it'll help to restore some of the, the structure and familiarity as the team built all throughout last season.
What do you think about Joel Embiid so far? Because, obviously he's been brilliant. 4 straight games with 30 points, but to me, it's a little bit of a reflection of how poorly this team is playing. It's just, all right, we got to give it to Embiid. He obviously has the green light, but even more so now with how they're struggling. And to me, despite him coming out of the gates really strongly, it's a little bit concerning at the same time, because to me it just magnifies the lack of supporting cast that Embiid has around him, at least at this moment.
Yeah, Ryan, that's a great point. I've definitely noticed that same thing. Joel has been, like you said, he's been dominant pretty much throughout this year. But it's just been, he's been the only thing that's really been keeping this team afloat, and his dominance hasn't necessarily come, within the flow of the team's scope as much as you might like. A lot of this is just him, with sheer domination and talent, being able to either post up on guys or shoot over guys or just use his size to his advantage. But, it kind of really shows you, an alarming situation. You have 2 generational guys, obviously, in Ben and Joel, but everything around them is really a question mark at this point. Those are guys that have been on the roster for a couple of years now. And I think it's a little alarming. And not going back to the fact that they didn't land a superstar. I'm not saying that. But you look at the pieces around these guys, and it doesn't necessarily look like they've been put in a position to, succeed to the top of their abilities. And I think you see that reflected so far in, how much Joel and Ben, when he's been out there, have both been, kind of forced to do early in this season.
Michael Kaskey-Blomain, 97.3 ESPN.com, covers the 76ers with us here on the Boardwalk Honda Hotline. So, Michael, Bobby Marks was on Tuesday's show. He said Markelle Fultz is a backup point guard. That's who he is. That's what his ceiling is, maybe. Would you agree with that when you watch Fultz play? Is he a number 1 overall pick? Like I said, what if he's Sean Livingston, a guy with a very high pick? He's got a great role in Golden State. He runs their second unit. He's very important to that team. Is that, if he's Sean Livingston, are people going to be okay with that? And do you see that do you think that that's what Markelle is?
To answer the first part, Mike, absolutely not. People will not be okay with that. And that's obviously not a knock on Sean Livingston, who, like you said, has had a, really solid career, especially after that injury he suffered, obviously, but to come back and be a contributing member to Golden State. But, we're talking about not only a number 1 pick, but a number 1 pick that we traded another lottery pick for. So no matter what Markelle does, if he's not, a star caliber player, ultimately, people are going to, not be satisfied with what they're giving to the team. And in terms of what Bobby said, I was listening to the show yesterday. I thought he had a lot of, insightful comments about the situation. I agreed with him, wholeheartedly in the present time that Markelle is a backup point guard. Right now that's the role he's best suited for. That's what he, should be playing, I believe, on this Sixers team. That's where he seems most comfortable. I'm not necessarily ready to cap him at that being that's his ceiling for the career. I still am holding out some hope that there's, he has the skill set. We've seen it. It's there. It's not like we're hoping that he develops these skills. It's almost like we're hoping that he remembers how to do some things. So I'm still holding out hope that ultimately, if he plays a role off the bench for the season, gains some confidence in his game, learns some of the defensive rotations, because he looks, really lost on defense a lot of the times. If he does a lot of that stuff off of a bench role, I still hold out hope that ultimately one day, maybe next season even, he can move back into that starting spot for JJ and be a guy that, while maybe not an all-star, can be a legit contributor for this team. But, right now he looks like he is, a backup player at the very least, at the best.
All right, so through 50 games last year, Michael, they were 25-25, and we were scratching our heads, and they added 2 pieces, Marco and Ersan. They took off, they won 52, and the rest is history. So, what are they lacking now that potentially through 50 games they need to go out and get?
It's funny you say that because it's almost a similar situation to what it was last year. They're really lacking, a punch off the bench. Wilson Chandler being out, I think hurts more than, maybe at least the casual fan knows. He was obviously not a marquee name, but he was probably the biggest name that the Sixers brought in from, an outside organization over the offseason in terms of, being a glue guy that can play a couple positions and was expected to play some pretty major minutes off the bench for this team. So I think they're missing that. But, like you said, they went out and got Ersan at the deadline last year. They added Marco right after that. And that's 2 guys that played a huge role for them. I think this year, outside of the starting 5, who's been, great when they played together, the starting 5 from last year, that is, with JJ in that role. JJ's been great. Joel's been great. Dario has struggled. They need more from him. But I think they just need more from that bench, whether it be shooting and just the guys that can, generate offense. I think that's something that they'll be looking for, either through a trade or on the free agent market or leading up to the deadline for sure.
MKB, I hate to be negative here, but I guess this is the road I'm going down today. When I look at this team, I fear – I'm not saying this is my full-on assessment at the moment, but I do have a fear in the back of my mind that even best case, at least for this season, that right now this is a team with a lot of talent. When you look at, each player, at least in the top 8 in the rotation, that they're skilled, they bring something to the table, but when you put them together, it just doesn't seem like that they can complement each other very well, even when they do start clicking. Do you see that as a potential, as that becoming a potential problem down the road, even when they do start clicking, that possibly with the pieces that they have, it just doesn't seem like the way Brett Brown is coaching them that they complement each other?
Yeah, I think that's definitely a concern, Ryan. I don't think it's something that's like absolutely pressing at this point, but I think there is. I mean, obviously with Markelle, there's tons of concern about how he fits next to Ben. We kind of touched on that. But I think this team is still missing a piece that it's been missing for, a long time now, and that's a guy that can get his own basket from the perimeter. It's what they hope Markelle would be. It's what I think a lot of fans expect Robert Covington to be. It's just something that they've been lacking. A guy like, just to throw names out there, a Kawhi Leonard, a Paul George, a guy that you can kick it to on the wing that can knock down shots or can generate his own offense. And I think until, either as Ben and Joel continue to grow, they'll be able to do more. But for this year, and as the team is constructed, I think it's becoming clear that they really need a third guy to, rely on from the perimeter. It's clear Markelle is not going to be that guy. JJ obviously has been shooting the lights out, but he's not a guy that you can kind of give the ball to create his own shot off the dribble when the shot clock's winding down. I think that's just something that they need, and until that time, I think it's going to look, a little bit sketchy. And obviously with Markelle kind of murking up a lot of the, the way they play together, I think that's, your question is one that's going to continue until really the situation with Fultz, I think, is resolved.
Michael Kaskey-Blomain, real quick, couple more. Brett Brown, what do you think? I mean, he's a guy that people either like, think he's a nice guy, think he's a nice guy but can't coach, thinks he can't coach, thinks he's the perfect guy. I don't know. There's a lot of people that fall somewhere in there. How has he done so far? I like Brett. I think he's a good guy. I think he's a great person to have in your organization. I think the last couple of years he's done a really good job. I don't know if he's the guy that is the championship coach, but I don't like the job he's done through 5 games so far. I can say that. So how would you say that Brett has done with this team? And is it fair to judge him based on, Markelle, that whole situation, and Wilson not being here, and Muscala? I mean, I know it's kind of tough, but I don't think he's done the best job with the rotation so far.
Yeah, I absolutely agree, Mike. And, I've been a big proponent of Brett, a big fan. I do think, I think he's done a great job putting this team in position. But I've definitely questioned, again, and it's back to the Markelle issue. It's almost impossible to talk about, anything with this team without, starting it off with Markelle. the way that he's handled the situation. Right from the jump, I thought starting him, and saying that you're going to start him for the first half, not start him in the second half. I've never seen anything like that. It didn't make sense to me when he announced it. I was standing there. I gave him the benefit of the doubt. I thought I would see how it worked. Through 5 games, it's working about how I thought it would work. I really don't know what his plan with Markelle is. I think it's pretty clear that he doesn't fully trust him, but he kind of wants to get him minutes. But it just seems, in the Detroit game, he rode TJ when Markelle was having a good game and just didn't put Markelle back in the game. Yesterday, I thought he played Markelle a little bit too much when he was clearly struggling on defense, and he didn't put TJ in when I thought, the team might have benefited from a burst of TJ's energy and grittiness for a while there. So, through 5 games this season, I'm sure it's a difficult situation, especially, like you said, missing Wilson, missing a couple of guys with injuries. But until he really figures out, he's either going to have to commit to Markelle Fultz now and be like, listen, we're going to take a hit in the short term in the win-loss column. We need to get this guy minutes in the starting lineup. Or he pushes him back to the bench and they start winning games again. Until he really figures out what he's going to do, I think these lineup issues are going to continue, and so will the second guessing.
Michael Kaskey-Blomain covers the Sixers. They play at home Saturday and Monday. And, of course, you can listen to those games right here on 97.3 ESPN. We'll have full coverage on Monday's show. Thanks, pal.
Thanks, fellas. Good talking to you.